or should I say, wah! Yes! We are tapping into some Orky vibe this week. I am unleashing my inner Ork for the first time in quite some time. I'm also going to be talking to you a little bit about campaign packs, and in particular, a notable conflict from 40k history. But wait, what's that you say? What 40k campaign pack could you be talking about? Well, as you might remember from some of my earlier videos, I have a great fondness for the campaign packs that were released during 5th edition fantasy, such as Grudge of Drong, Circle of Blood, and there was a whole bunch of other ones which I've already talked about. Lesser known, though, is that at the same time these were released, they also released a 40k campaign pack called, as you may have guessed from the title of this video, Storm of Vengeance. This was an attempt to do for 40k the same thing they had done with these campaign packs, which was releasing a number of linked scenarios that formed part of a greater narrative alongside some cardboard scenery. But Games Workshop really pulled out all the stops on this campaign pack. This was, unlike the other ones, which are very nice and shiny, which had 4 linked battles, this had at least 10 linked battles with the possibility of more, and it was centred around Ghazgkhull's summer holiday. Yes, it's the Battle of Armageddon. No, it was the battle for Piscina IV. Yes, so Ghazgkhull Mag Uruk Thraka, most famous orc basically to ever live in the entirety of the history of 40k. Made his first appearance properly in the Orc Codex in 2nd edition, and to coincide with this edition of the game, Games Workshop decided to release a campaign pack using everyone's favourite Orc warlord. Having already, cut his teeth battling against old Balai on the surface of Armageddon, they unleashed Ghazgkhull on a new, unsuspecting world. As you've already heard me say, Piscina IV. This was a world that's about 6,000 light years away from the Eye of Terror, somewhere over the galactic northeast. And they decided, for this campaign, which was released using the 2nd edition rules, that they would pit 2 mighty forces against each other, the forces of the Orks and the Dark Angels. And yeah, I'm going to just talk you through a little bit about the lore that was kind of formed the part and parcel of this campaign, but also tell you a little bit about just the history of the rules pack. Join me, let's dive in. So, okay, Ghazgkhull is fresh from the battles of Armageddon. He's been defeated only due to the intervention of the Adeptus Astartes. I think otherwise it's quite clear that the battle with old Balai notwithstanding, he could have won. But the body of Ghazgkhull was never found, and thus he was let free to unleash his particular brand of Orky mayhem on the galaxy at large. Games Workshop decided to pair him up with another Orky warlord who formed part and parcel of Codex Orc 2nd edition, Nazgul Ugg Erdgrub, the Bad Moon warlord. And whereas Ghazgkhull was unleashed upon the galaxy in yet another campaign of carnage and domination, Nazgul was in it for the teeth. So, let's set the scene. The lore here is this. Piscina IV is an imperial world that was settled by the Dark Angels during the Great Crusade. It was brought into compliance, is the term we would probably use now, although that wasn't a term that they used then. And as part and parcel of bringing the human population back under the control of the Emperor of Mankind, the Dark Angels built kind of a small fortress temple in the capital of the planet, Cadalus Harbour. And from sort of once a generation or so, the Ork would just orbit through the Piscina system. They would raid the nearby orbiting death world, Piscina V, for recruits, and then it would take those inductees that were deemed to be suitable and kind of inculpate them into the chapter, indoctrinate them into the chapter at the temple at Cadalus Harbour before zooming off again. This means there was a Dark Angels garrison centred on Cadalus Harbour, just there kind of helping ensure the Imperial Governor remains loyal and ensuring the defence of the system. But that means that when Ghazgkhull and his new bestest mate Nazdrag arrive in system on Nazdrag's personal space hulk Scylla, then the Dark Angels kind of send out a request for aid back to the Rock, and the Rock sends a strike cruiser full of Deathwing Terminators and the Dark Angels 3rd Company under the then Company Master, Belial, who would go on to become Grand Master of the Deathwing in due course. But they send those off to reinforce the garrison and deal with this Orky menace. So, let's dive into the scene. What happens first is Nazdrag had captured control of the Space Hulk Scylla using Orky force field technology. So this is good old-fashioned Orky no-wots. His mechs saw the Space Hulk emerge from the warp on whatever world Ghazgkhull happened to be on. They captured the Space Hulk in a tractor beam, using a force field to hold on to it, formed a bubble around the Space Hulk, filled it with air, and then they were able to teleport boys onto the Space Hulk and take it over. Then they were able to use force fields to kind of redirect its motion through the system and channel it back into the warp so that they could unleash their war on the rest of the galaxy. Ghazgkhull, looking for a mode of transport and also hearing about this sort of new version of teleporter technology that Nazdreg's mechs were experimenting with, saw within it the perfect opportunity to advance his cause of galactic domination in the name of Gork, or possibly Mork. To this end, he promised Nazdreg as many teeth as he could carry, and then some, in exchange for his assistance, which, being a bad mood, Nazdreg was well up for. The Orks then refined the teleporter technology, targeted Piscina IV as kind of the source of the next stage of their invasion, and also kind of as a test bed for Ghazgkhull to test out his master plan that we would eventually see this teleporter technology being used for in the third war for Armageddon. But so, Ghazgkhull and Nazdreg arrive in system on the Scylla, and Nazdreg uses his new teleport technology to teleport Ghazgkhull and as many boys as he can fit on the teleporter pad, all the way across the entire system. Never mind, like teleporting down from orbit. He teleports out from the outer reaches of the system, down onto the surface of Catalyst Harbour. The problem they immediately face is that doing this burns out pretty much every generator and sort of power source on board the Hulk. It uses so much energy that everything just explodes in showers of sparks and, Orks getting flung up into space and Grots presumably just running around wailing on fire. And Ghazgkhull is left on the surface of Catalyst Harbour with only the forces that he has been able to teleport down there with him, which is a nice big mob of boys, which he kind of immediately goes, right, well, clearly what we need to do is give the mechs a shoey, which he does. And then he settles on the idea that what they need to do is capture control of some of the power plants in Catalyst Harbour, and this will enable him to then form a beacon to transmit back to the Scylla and beam energy back to the Hulk so they can use to teleport down more reinforcements and continue the war. So the first scenario then that we get in Storm of Vengeance is the assault on Catalyst Harbour. It's wonderfully called If You Want Something Done. Presumably then do it yourself. And it centres around Ghazgkhull and his boys attacking this power generating station in the centre of Catalyst Harbour, which, thankfully for the Imperial forces at least, is also the city where the Dark Angel's garrison is based. The Imperium then are defended by Master Chaplain Uriel, and there was a Lexicanum called Karen there, and then a number of tactical squads, some reinforcements from the Deathwing, the Ravenwing, basically a nice selection of stuff that you had in the Dark Angel's Codex at that time. But the idea was it was a battle for control of the power plant, and if Ghazgkhull was able to capture control of this power plant, then he could send a beacon back to the Hulk and start carrying on the invasion. The following scenarios then centre around the principle that Ghazgkhull successfully captured the power plant in Catalyst Harbour. There was then a mass city fight over the sort of battles fought between forces of Orks, led by Ghazgkhull, and the Dark Angel garrison and the human planetary defence force for control of Catalyst Harbour as a whole. But meanwhile, Nazdreg, having successfully made contact with the surface of the planet, had been trying to lob sort of units of boys down to the planet. Up until this point, this had been going horribly wrong. They'd been teleporting into, volcanoes or, 5 miles under the surface of the sea or whatever. This hadn't let it stop him. He just kept throwing Orks at the planet in the vague hope that they would stick. Once Ghazgkhull successfully activates his beacon, though, Nazdreg's able to home in on the location that the Orks have successfully landed, starts teleporting down more boys, and eventually, once he's satisfied that they've got control of enough power generating facilities, he teleports down there himself, because he's not going to be left out of a good scrap. Whilst Ghazgkhull battled against the forces of Chapter Master Belial then in the heart of Catalyst Harbour, Belial sent a scouting force eastward to investigate the extent of the foe that they faced. They initially pushed through kind of a weak screen of goblin sentries, grot sentries, and it was after this then that they discovered that there was a much larger force, Nazdreg's army, gathered in the area near the eastern slopes of Koth Ridge. After they pushed through these grot sentries, they discovered that there was a massing army of Bad Moon Orks, led by Nazdreg, in the region of the eastern slopes of Koth Ridge. And it's after this then that veteran Sergeant Naman comes into the mix. This is a model that had been... it wasn't produced until the 3rd edition Dark Angels Codex was released. That's this one, for anyone who's wondering. But featured as a character in the Angels of Death Codex and featured as a character in this book, in this campaign pack. Veteran Sergeant Naman then and a small group of scouts infiltrated behind Nazdreg's lines at Koth Ridge and probed to discover exactly where these Orc reinforcements were coming from. Up until this point, Belial had been focused on trying to push the Orc forces out of Catalyst Harbour, but realising now that he faced a full-scale invasion, Company Master Belial ordered Librarian Karen to request aid from the rest of the Dark Angels chapter. They were told that this would be at least 10 days for them to make transit through the warp to arrive at Piscina IV and offer assistance. Determined to push the Orcs and find out how they were arriving on the battlefield, he tasked Veteran Sergeant Naman and his scout company with infiltrating behind Orc lines in a daring nighttime raid. And this is played out in a scenario known as Shadow Warriors, which I guess now, if we were to fight it, would probably be fought using the kill team rules. Veteran Sergeant Naman and his forces report back to the Dark Angel lines, and upon reaching the brow of a low hill, the Space Marines stare down in wonder and disbelief at an extraordinary sight playing out before them. Through the portal, they watch as Orc boys on foot, festooned with crude weapons and warbikes and buggies, and even an Orc dreadnought pouring out through this portal. Each time that these Orcs would appear, the edges of this portal would kind of glow brightly as power would burn through the portal, and then the portal would dim as it took a few moments to recharge. The scouts, having gotten past the guards, got close enough to the power plant to use their scanners to reveal that it was being used to relay energy back off planet. And therefore the obvious course was for the Space Marines to seek to destroy the power plant. However, they were concerned that this could lead to a geothermal meltdown, which would have dire consequences for the entire planet. Certainly something the Dark Angels are well familiar with. Faced with this dreadful dilemma, Veteran Sergeant Naman spotted a crude Orc relay had been grafted onto the outside of the Orc power plant, and resolved that if he destroyed this, it might cause the portal to cease to function. Wasting no time in relaying a message back to the majority of the Dark Angel army, he realised that the only thing that could arrive in time would be like a deep strike attack by Deathwing Terminators. But the Orcs had captured control of the planet's defence laser sites, and they were sure that if the Dark Angel strike cruiser, Unrelenting Fury, came into low orbit to perform such a teleport strike, then the Orcs would start shooting at it, and eventually they were bound to hit something vital. Therefore, Veteran Sergeant Naman decided to do what he could to sabotage the Orc energy portal, and then hold his position there for as long as possible, until such time as the Dark Angels could take out the defense laser site and then teleport in the Deathwing reinforcements. This would eventually cost Veteran Sergeant Naman his life. There's an awesome little bit of Orky kind of background that's published as part of the campaign pack at this point. I'm going to read it to you. Tough Zog roared with glee as his lads thundered towards the scouts. It was obvious the Humies were doomed. The Goths surrounded them, howling their bestial war cries in anticipation of the carnage to come. The scouts were so busy trading fire with the evil sons they didn't even seem to have spotted the hulking Orc warriors storming through the ruins. Suddenly, a bright blue flash off to his right seared Tough Zog's eyeballs and sent him sprawling across the treacherous ground. As his vision cleared, the flare coalesced to reveal 6 hulking figures already moving into defensive positions. An icy chill sank into his belly as memories of previous encounters with the huge white-armoured warriors came back to him. As he watched, a mob of feral boar boys veered off to counter this new threat, the rubble around him shaking with the thunder of their passing. As one, the Space Marines pivoted to face them and opened fire. Bolt guns blazed and the air filled with the clamour like a beating of 1,000 drums. Twitching like puppets, the savage Orcs were flung from their mounts. When the dust had cleared, all that could be seen of the once colourful mob was a few crumpled feathers and the still heaving carcasses of the orcs and their shattered mounts. "Zorgy now," swore Tough Zog. This was going to be a little bit more exciting than he had bargained for. Gotta love the fact, A, this is an orc who has survived a previous encounter with the Deathwing, but B, his response on seeing an entire mob of boar boys gunned down is to just go, "Great! This is going to be brilliant!" I love orcs. Although the orcs were able to replace the lost power plant that had been destroyed by veteran Sergeant Armour, they still left a hole in their power grid that needed to be filled, and the Dark Angels were quick to capitalise on this. They dispatched an interrogator chaplain by the name of Boreas to defend the power plant at Barak Gorge. The orcs, meanwhile, swarmed in en masse, led by Ghazgkhull and Nazdrag, in an attempt to recapture. This is this mass combat then that takes place at this point. The kill ratio is something in the region of 7 to 1. 7 orcs for every space marine that falls. But of course, you know how many orcs there are. They just keep pouring into the conflict. Nonetheless, the orcs are repelled. And this leads to kind of a final showdown once more at Kothridge, a second battle. The Space Marines then capitalise upon their victory at Barak Gorge by trying to force the Orks away from their landing site, where the Orks are trying to bring down reinforcements from the Space Hulk Scylla, but even then doing battle with the Space Marine strike cruiser in orbit. And this leads to the final assault, the second assault as it's known, at Kothridge, in the scenario Death by Moonlight. The Space Marines then form up essentially a gun line outside the teleporter site, and as fast as orcs are pouring out of the wormhole from the teleporter portal, they're gunned down by the waiting Space Marines. You can almost imagine these orcs kind of popping out of a portal going, "Oh!" and then getting shot, and just adding to this heap of orc dead. Nazdrag then realised that if he didn't clear the orcs, these Space Marines away from his landing site, then the whole thing was going to be over. So he forges this last-ditch combat at Kothridge. The Orky plan involves a pincer movement between Nazdrag on one side and Ghazgkhull on the other. Ghazgkhull coming out of Catalyst Harbour, Nazdrag assaulting over Kothridge, hopefully catching the Space Marines between them. It's an epic, massive throwdown. And unfortunately, in the end, the Orks are defeated and they have to retreat back to the Scylla. But of course, Orks are never really defeated. Ghazgkhull learned what he needed to from this battle and was able to, relying upon the Orc genius, Orchimedes, possibly one of the lost brain boys, he was able to refine Nazdrag's teleporter technology and use that to assault Armageddon in the final third war of Armageddon, which is still raging even if Ghazgkull's not there now himself. I'll perhaps do a future video about the Third War of Armageddon. It's worthy of mention in and of itself. So Piscina IV then persists kind of within Games Workshop lore, within Games Workshop background. As I said, it was a campaign pack that was released for 2nd edition, but they then re-released it and updated it for 3rd and 4th edition. So it was used to work with these two fine codices that I have here. And they essentially updated each of the scenarios with new objective maps, exactly to match kind of the way in which battle missions worked in 3rd and 4th edition, and working alongside the kind of the force organisation charts that were introduced at that time. But even that was not enough for Piscina IV. Piscina IV then made a further appearance in the pages of Black Library. Gav Thorpe drafted a Black Library Space Marines battles novel set in Catalyst Harbour, which is an excellent read if you haven't read it. Gav Thorpe's certainly the master of writing Dark Angels. But even that was not enough for Games Workshop. The Battle of Piscina IV was eventually released as a video game, albeit kind of a side-scrolling lane clearing, almost kind of Plants vs Zombies, except it's Dark Angels vs Orcs style video game for the iOS. And I think they also released it on PC. It is an enduring part of 40K lore. I think it's cool that the artwork that was originally released for the Storm of Vengeance pack became the cover art for the 3rd edition Dark Angels and 4th edition Dark Angels Codex, and that elements of the story, of the narrative, form such an integral part of the Dark Angels. Belial becoming Grand Master of the Deathwing after his success in purging the Orcish presence on Piscina IV. The Dark Angels 3rd edition Codex includes chapter company badges that you can paint onto your Space Marines to show that they've taken part in the Piscina IV campaign, which I think is a cool little extra treat that they add in there. I love the Piscina IV campaign, as I love all of the kind of the campaign packs that were released at that time, and I know I've said it before and I'll say it again, I wish Games Workshop would re-release this style of linked campaign pack. I would certainly buy them. To that end, I'm gonna play through some of the scenarios of Piscina IV in due course, so keep an eye peeled for those videos coming up. They're going to be, I'll apologise now, they're not going to be 2nd edition 40k, because as much as I like 2nd edition 40k, playing a game of 2nd edition 40k takes forever. Instead, I'm going to play them in the 3rd, 4th edition era of 40k, so if you love that edition of 40k like I do, then by all means tune in for those. In the meantime though, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed me ranting on about the Orks and the Dark Angels in this video and gibbering about the lore of the campaign for Piscina IV. Come back next time when I'm sure I will have more intriguing slices of Games Workshop history to share with you. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.